What we are seeing right now throughout the country is that young people are appalled.
But for them to call for a ceasefire is Mr. Putin's message.
All right, let's get stupid. So over the weekend, there were a couple of appearances by Democratic politicians on Sunday political shows that I want to discuss, as there is a lot of controversy around both of these clips. And they're both in relation to Gaza, Israel, and Joe Biden. And the reaction to both are different for different reasons, as you're going to see what each of them say here. So I'm going to start with Nancy Pelosi, and I'll get to reactions online as well to these, as well as some facts around this stuff and analysis. But first, Nancy Pelosi on State of the Union on CNN. Right here, she's discussing protests for ceasefires, and you're going to see where she goes with this.
They're in front of my house all the time. So I have a feeling for what feelings they have. But we have to think about what we're doing. And what we have to do is try to stop the suffering in Gaza. This is women and children, people who don't have a place to go. So let's address that. But for them to call for a ceasefire is Mr. Putin's message. Mr. Putin's message. Make no mistake, this is directly connected to what he would like to see.
All right. This is so incredibly stupid for obvious reasons. First, allow me to be facetious for a bit here before we get to some real analysis and reactions online. But I suppose 61% of voters, and this is back from November, by the way, that support a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, are just parroting Mr. Putin's message, including 76% of Democrats, which don't really support human rights. No, they support Mr. Putin's message. Okay, let's first address the claims here. Are there people out there, specifically online, that are not honest in their support of a ceasefire, that are not honest in their discussions around Israel's human rights abuses, that have ulterior motives for why they're discussing these things? Of course, every single conflict, every single debate around politics is going to be exploited by somebody. Are some of those people maybe connected to Russia who are trying to argue that you should not vote for Biden and by relation vote for Trump instead, who is worse in a variety of ways? Under Trump, there were a record number of drone strikes that was even increased over Obama's numbers. He launched an airstrike on Iran's top general, which almost led to a war with Iran. He recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which increased tensions in the region. And then he recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which literally now there is a settlement there called Trump Heights. So to claim that Trump would be better suited to deal with what's going on right now is completely insane. So are there people exploiting this to try and, hurt Joe Biden in some way? Of course there are, as there is in every situation around politics. There's going to be someone trying to exploit that. That is not worth mentioning on a television program as a sitting Democrat, when there is serious human rights atrocities being committed by Israel. So her bringing that up is simply a distraction from the reality that, of course, there should be a ceasefire. We just recently saw the ICJ rule that Israel must take steps to prevent a genocide. Again, I do a greater breakdown in that video and discuss why they didn't outright call it a genocide. There is real legal implications around why they did that or why they didn't say that. But that aside, whether it's human rights experts, whether it's places like Human Rights Watch, which has been calling out Israel for quite some time, which also, by the way, have discussed Russian war crimes, but Putin's message to call for a ceasefire. It's so incredibly dishonest, especially when we look at the numbers here. I mean, a lot of the support for a ceasefire is based on what we are seeing. These numbers are as of January 3rd, so they're a bit out of date. But I mean, the orange here are the Palestinian fatalities in Gaza. It's very clear. People paying attention that care about human rights, that care about the suffering of Palestinians, want a ceasefire. This is not Putin's message. But let me play a bit more of this, if there's anything else worth taking from this before I get to some reactions online to Pelosi, and then I'll get to AOC's video.
Same thing with Ukraine. It's about Putin's message. I think some of these protesters are spontaneous and organic and sincere. Some, I think, are connected to Russia, and I say that having looked at this for a long time now. As you know,
think some of these protests?
Okay, it's not worth playing the rest. This is so stupid. Let's even pretend for a second. Let's say, I don't know, for some reason there's a protest connected to Putin that's supporting a ceasefire. The act of supporting a ceasefire is still the correct act. Like, it just to try and connect this to Putin is just incredibly dishonest, and an attempt to try and put out a fire that is going on within the Democratic Party on this issue specifically. But I want to get to some reactions here. So Zara here saying, just to be clear, I never want to hear a single word from my former colleagues about how this country is somehow safer for Muslims now than before, when the speaker is so casually suggesting increased surveillance on Muslim and Arabs who dare express dissent. Shame. Yes, that was also, I'm not sure if I played that part of the clip, but Pelosi also goes on to discuss how there should be increased surveillance on, there should be money put towards looking into who's behind these protests and the support for a ceasefire. It is very dangerous to go down that path. Jamil Dakwar here writing, vilifying and calling to investigate anti-war protesters with no evidence of any criminal wrongdoing is dangerous. The only investigation that should be open is against senior government officials for aiding and abetting Israel's mass atrocities in Gaza. Agreed. And Walid Shahid here saying this is unacceptable disinformation being spread by the most powerful Democratic Party leaders about the positions of the vast majority of Democratic Party voters. Yeah. And also worth mentioning here how high the disapproval right now is for Joe Biden among ages 18 to 29. This is why Biden was able to win in 2020. He got out a lot of people, a lot of Gen Z, a lot of millennials out to vote, people that hadn't voted before or don't normally vote, got them out to vote for him, and really to vote against Donald Trump. But he is now losing a lot of those people, at least in terms of approval, disapproval. So I would say there's less of a guarantee you're going to get the kind of numbers that Biden saw in 2020 out in 2024. And this has largely been moved since October and since the response from Joe Biden to continue supporting Israel despite the clear imbalance of power here. So that's what the Democratic Party should really be concerned about, instead of, talking about Putin and somehow making ceasefire a Putin message. Let's get to now AOC. So there's controversy around this appearance as well, or this clip specifically. Let's check this out.
Some of your colleagues, and we talked about what's happened at the protests this week, have called the president Genocide Joe. Some of your colleagues have accused the president of supporting genocide, including Rashida Tlaib. Do you agree with that word, genocide, that the president's been supporting a genocide, or does that go too far?
I think what we are seeing right now throughout the country is that young people are appalled at the violence and the indiscriminate loss of life. We are not just seeing 25,000 people that have died in Gaza. We are seeing the starvation of millions of people, the displacement of over 2 million Gazans. We have South Africa that has mounted a court in the ICJ. The ICJ ruled this week that Israel has a grave responsibility to prevent genocide.
But they're still determining whether it's a genocide. Do you think that
they are
term
still
is responsible,
determining
given
it?
that it's still under investigation?
It's worth noting that the ICJ did not have the authority to simply state there is a genocide going on. The entire point was to continue the investigation into whether or not there is a genocide going on, which is why it was stated that way. It's dishonest for the NBC host here to try and imply otherwise, that the ICJ would have called or could have called it a genocide, when that was not the purpose of the court and the case. But let me just continue this.
I believe that they're still determining it, but in the interim ruling, The fact that they said there's a responsibility to prevent it, the fact that this word is even in play, the fact that this word is even in our discourse, I think demonstrates the mass inhumanity that Gazans are facing. And so whether you are an individual that believes this is a genocide, which, by the way, in our polling, we are seeing large amounts of Americans concerned specifically with that word. So I don't think that it is something to completely toss someone out of our public discourse for using. But I think what we are seeing here is that the Netanyahu government has lost public support, and that we have a responsibility to protect the human rights and the humanity of Gazans and hostages alike in the area.
All right, so you may be wondering, what is the controversy here? The controversy is that AOC did not directly call it a genocide, which it is. It is a genocide. Now, there is various ways you could take this. So, first, we have to think about the audience that AOC is trying to speak to. Which audience is she trying to speak to? Is she trying to speak to the 60 to 100-year-olds that watch these Sunday morning shows live? Is she speaking to, left-wing Twitter? Or is she speaking to Joe Biden? So if all you care about is AOC stating the facts, then yes, she should have came out and said there is a genocide. Clearly, there is a genocide, and Joe Biden isn't doing enough. He has to do more. If you want to put on your strategic hat here, AOC potentially is trying to play. And by the way, I should mention, I think AOC knows it's a genocide. It's very clear. AOC has been clear in other situations or in other, like, she supports a ceasefire, which I guess she's parroting Putin's message now, but she came out in support of ceasefire, a while ago. This is simply an argument around semantics, around what is the strategy here? So your reaction to AOC's answer relies completely on what you think her job in that appearance should be. Should it be to educate an aging audience on reality? And you do that often, not by hitting them with facts directly, but by trying to ease them into the reality and bringing in this case, the ICJ as an example of how we should be concerned about a potential genocide, even though, yes, there's a genocide happening, but just in the ICJ's words. Or is it to put pressure on Biden's the administration to change course? Or is it to simply state the facts regardless of the fallout? So let me get to some reactions that may help to clarify why there is controversy here. Ryan Grimm tweeting, with Bernie tied up in knots over the word ceasefire, this was a moment AOC could have emerged as the undisputed leader of the left wing of the party. That's not the role she's playing here, which goes to question, is she trying to play an inside game, which we'll get to another response that addresses that. Owen Higgins here writing, the refusal to make a statement on this either way is the kind of thing that loses you support, not gains it. It's hard to disagree there, especially when clips like this go viral. Neil Meyer here writing, unfortunately, I think this is a good illustration of the limits of the insider-outsider strategy. If you want to maintain access to the inside, you have to sacrifice your ability to champion the politics and values of those outside when the real insiders set red lines. Great point here. And I think this is the ultimate point to take from this. This shows the limitations of what AOC is trying to do. You have someone like Rashida Tlaib outright calling it a genocide, calling out Joe Biden, the administration, for not doing enough, for not stopping it, and doing it, and saying it passionately. AOC here is playing a different game. And I have not seen either strategy work, which is why I'm so conflicted on the reaction to this. Because on one hand, yes, of course, I want her to come out and just clearly call this what it is. On the other hand, if she's playing a different game, which clearly she is, then maybe she feels that her ability to potentially pressure the administration is sacrificed if she straight up calls out Biden supporting a genocide. And I think that's true. At the same time, I also think it's true that playing this game doesn't work either. Playing this strategy where you're not willing to call out the administration directly, publicly, has also not been successful. So there's no real winning here with either strategy, because there's no way you're going to move the Biden administration by either playing the insider game or playing the outsider game like Rashida Tlaib is. And then ultimately, by doing what she's doing here, she is sacrificing a bit of her potential, maybe power or the way people view her within activist circles. It's all. I find the reaction sort of overblown for the reality of what this clip is and who watches these shows. But again, these shows are also watched by people online and clipped out like this, so it has an impact either way. Another reaction here. So this is from my mentions. I just want to show you the different reactions I'm getting. So I tweeted out, she knows it's genocide. The problem with shows like this is you're speaking to two audiences, the 6 to 100-year-olds that wake up and watch a Sunday morning political news show and need to be eased into reality like a warm bath, and left Twitter. Someone is coming away unhappy. So I got two different kinds of replies. Evan here writing, there also seems to be an argument among leftists on Twitter that somehow she's compromising her values for saying this. That's how the game is played. You need to use your messaging to tailor it to a certain audience. Of course, she knows it's a genocide, but this answer is good. So Evan coming from the perspective that she's trying to tailor this message to the older audience and trying to ease them into the facts. Because again, looking at data here, the older generations tend to not be as aware of what is going on in Gaza compared to the younger generations. So she's using this platform on a show that is viewed by older people to try and ease them into the facts of what is going on. So yeah, that's one reaction. Another reaction here from Scarlet Red writing, dodging the question is really just cowardice though. This is the time it takes. This is the time to take a stand. It's so important and could save lives. It's clear she doesn't want the ire of leadership, which I think is also true. If she came out and said that Joe Biden, if she, first of all, called it a genocide, that would mean that she is then supporting Joe Biden, who is supporting a genocide. And that would, of course, draw the ire of leadership. And you could argue, because of that, they may be less inclined to listen to her side of the argument. At the same time, they're currently also not listening to her side of the argument, which goes to my ultimate point here that you don't win either way with Joe Biden, which then goes to who this message really is for. And ultimately, it's really geared towards the Sunday morning political news audience that is watching this, which, again, skews older and may not care regardless of what AOC says. So I question the entire efficacy of what's even the point of appearing on a show like this when ultimately it just gets you shit. But I just want to point this out that AOC does support a ceasefire. So, I guess she's backing Putin's message of ceasefire. And yeah, that was it. So I want your thoughts on Pelosi, which I think is pretty black and white. There's not real much debate over how insane those comments were. But also AOC, what do you think her strategy should be? Or what do you think she went into that appearance? Or I should say, what kind of mindset do you think she went into that appearance with? Because that really ultimately is where this all falls. Is she doing this to try and pressure Joe Biden? Is she doing this to try and speak to an older audience? Is there any point at all at appearing on these shows to say anything? I want to hear your thoughts.